I'm Kelsey Litchfield, and this is the Field Advisor Podcast, where I talk with local experts to unpack the latest agronomy information and research, giving you the knowledge to make informed decisions out in the field. Hey everyone, welcome back to a brand new season of Field Advisor. Welcome to 2025. I shouldn't say welcome back to 2025. We are clearly in 2025. I'm Kelsey Litchfield, and we took a bit of a break over the winter, but now we're back looking ahead to the 2025 growing season. I don't know where you guys are, but here it's raining. Maybe get a little mix of snow tomorrow, so it feels a little bit like spring. The grass is getting a little greener. I noticed that this morning, so I'm like, oh, spring is just about here. But we still have to deal with some winter weather before we do that. But before we know it, planters will be rolling, and another season will be getting underway. So a bit of background before I introduce our speakers today, or guests. I'm still in winter meeting mode. Today's episode comes from a very hot topic we had at this year's Field Advisor Forum, which we held January 16th in Champaign. We had an independent crop consultants panel, which one of our guests was part of that discussion. And then after the event, we did say, I will say we got some feedback that thought the panel was a bit one-sided, and they felt it came across as too critical of ag retail. So we're going to get into that today and just talk it out. So I thought, let's start off the podcast this year talking about this topic. So joining me today are Eric Beckett, field agronomist with Align IFS, and Karen Corrigan, independent agronomist with MC Agronomics. Their names probably sound familiar. They were soy envoys last year. And just when you thought you were done with me last fall, here we are kicking off the 2025 growing season with you. So I appreciate you being here. So a bit of a background. As we know, farmers have no shortage of ways to get their information, videos, podcasts such as this one, blogs, meetings, you name it. They're always trying to get more information. But one of their most trusted sources is still their agronomist. And let's be honest, bias is something we face every single day. Retail agronomists can be tied to a single product. Independent crop consultants may have their own preferences to manufacturers as well. So we're going to see both sides to it today. So Eric, I want to start with you. You mentioned wanting to defend ag retailers from the Field Advisor Forum. Talk about how you believe you have the farmer's best interest at mind and sharing more perspective on that.
Well, sometimes I think there's sometimes a misconception that all ag retail is, what concerns them is how much product we can sell a grower. But at the end of the day, if the growers that we're representing and servicing, if they're not prosperous and, that they can't achieve their goals with their farming operations, then we certainly at ag retail cannot achieve our goals as well too. So it's a symbiotic relationship with ag retail and the growers. And so if the growers are making money, ag retail is making the money. And so I think that's really, and that the ag retail that I represent, Align IFS, within the FS GrowMark system, it's really about service. And if we're not providing that service to our grower customers, then we've missed our number one goal with the grower customers that we service. So, on either side of the fence, I'm sure there's bad eggs on either side of the fence, but I guess I would like to hope and like to think that, the FS GrowMark system is a step above than say maybe the average retailer, maybe that one retailer maybe he's got a bad name or a grower's had a bad experience with. And so I just, want to throw that out there that if the growers are not prosperous, we're not prosperous.
Mm-hmm. So can you give an example how maybe you've seen these biases play out from your own perspective? I think maybe one thing that was brought up in the panel was biologicals. There's so many biologicals out in the market. So people want to push those products to say that they work. And Karen, I'll get to you in a second, but Eric, maybe share an example of how that might look from your end.
Yeah. So, I think it's just as anybody else. I've had my bad experiences with biologicals as well too. But I will say that being on the retail side and representing multiple brands of different products, I have the ability, the exposure for one to see how these different products perform, and then help make those recommendations if growers are interested in those type products. Always, I've got lots of product exposure of just different people coming across my desk, names, products coming across my desk. But on the flip side with that, I also see a lot more. I think I'm access to a lot of research, because not only research and evaluation of the products even internally, but I also see the manufacturer data. So I can pit manufacturers against manufacturers. And so I'm always being presented with say a fresh look of products and services that are available out there, and maybe not necessarily just hung up on maybe that one bad experience, maybe that, I think we probably all had with biologicals.
Will you say something if a product doesn't work or a grower asks you about it, and maybe you say, "Be
Yeah,
cautious of
most
so and so."
yeah, most definitely. I mean, there's products that we represent that I've evaluated them locally, and yeah, they may fit for somebody, but they don't work for our growers that are in our the area that I work in. And so yes, most definitely I've had lots of conversations with growers that maybe one that they're interested in, or maybe even one that we've used previously, and because there's been either another variation of that product, or maybe say there's a completely new product that's come across that has better performance. I've unrecommended products I've recommended in the past,
Hmm.
so constantly refreshing, say those products that working with in biological.
Karen, I've imagined you've unrecommended products before. I mean, there's always a chance to trial products, see how they do, and from products differ from field to field. So I'm sure you come across that as well. And I know you have an example of um, a farmer working with an ag retailer, then something went wrong. And I know there's this thing here of independent, we can speak our minds about anything, and maybe ag retail can't, and vice versa. But I think at the end of the day, the farmer's just looking for solid information, no matter where it comes from.
So, how we run our consulting is that we have all our individual growers. We ask them what they want to test, and then we test it as a whole. And so, we have a lot of data that we go through. We get the yield data, we parse it out, we figure out where things worked and where they didn't. And then we just tell our growers, well, here we saw these results, and here we saw these results, but we still need to, verify that those are happening. So we need to do it again, usually at least 2 to 3 years. We also look at the university data, which the Crop Protection Network just put out kind of a rather scathing review of biologicals on their site, which was several universities. So, there's different ways to get information, but we do a lot of our own research with our growers so that we have independent data also. But I will say that farmers come to us because they want somebody who's not selling them the product. They tell us that all the time. So, I'm not selling anything, but I will give the best advice I have. The farmers can choose whether or not they want to take my advice or somebody else's. And then if they choose to use a product, they still have to go buy it from someone else.
Eric, how do you respond to that? That farmers want to get information from someone that's not selling a product, being in your position?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the products that I recommend, they don't always necessarily end up in a publication, such as any type of media outlet that growers. I mean, it's just endless these days. And so a lot of times, the products that I, maybe representing don't end up in one of those outlets. And so sometimes I think it's a process that you have to educate the grower first off. What are we trying to achieve here? And I think sometimes biologicals, it's seen as the silver bullet, almost a silver bullet effect. But when you really get down to it, a lot of times when biologicals maybe thought about getting integrated into an operation, generally they've got low. If you think about the barrel and stave method, we talk about that all the time in agriculture. But a lot of times in growers' operations, a lot of times, when you think about biologicals, there's a lower stave that oftentimes need to be fixed before we, think about integrating a biological into the system. So a lot of times, just on the topic of biologicals, a lot of times I'll even just walk that conversation back. And biologicals, it turns into that, maybe we need to fix a pH issue, or it could be anything. And so just like, the topic of that, and, we do independent testing. I mean, I run a trialing program every year where we're, based upon what the the growers' operations, what are their capabilities are, or maybe we've even got the equipment in house that maybe we'll work alongside the grower and help implement those trials and make those applications and work with the growers, share data back and forth so that we can use spatially represented data from application and then get their yield data and use real numbers to figure out if these products are working. I always get the manufacturer data. I get, within the FS GrowMark system, there is a whole trialing system called My Field Trial Data, and that's a compilation of all the FS member companies. And so, just in the Midwest, that's 4 states right there that sometimes we can get trialing data that we can also use to get trialing data. And I'll agree right there with Karen too that I lean heavily on university data. I've got the University of Illinois in my backyard, but I reach out to other neighboring land grant universities as well too, and utilize that data. So, I mean, I never use just one data source. I'm always picking through multiple data sources as well too.
Karen, on that topic of, gathering data, being up to date in the latest technology, how do you stay competitive with that? I mean, they have all this information knowledge coming from the manufacturer side that's a pipeline straight to them. How do you stay competitive with that and gaining that information that they're gaining as well?
We have to, implement the trials with our growers and find out for ourselves. Even if something's new, we always tell our growers that you shouldn't put it on a large amount of your acreage the first year. You need to try it and make sure that it actually works for you on your farm. We talk so much about how fields are so site specific. Well, that goes with all products too. So unless you've independently verified that it's actually giving you a return on investment, you should only use the products that are doing that. But I will reiterate what Eric said. If a product might fix a problem, but if it's not your most yielding limiting factor, it doesn't matter. It's not doing you any good. You have to fix the other bigger problem first and go from there.
And how do you work with a grower? Let's say they come to you and say, I want to trial this, and this might be something you've never done before, or maybe it's some product that's really brand new on the market. How do you educate yourself so that you are a source of information for them?
I had a grower just this past week. He had been at I don't know if it was a seminar or something, and he's like, have you heard of this product? And so I looked up the product, I read the materials, I found some data that was from Cornell University and went through that. And we discussed how we thought it could work, how it might not work, where we might place it to see its best possible situation that it might work in. But we always like to test things in more marginal ground and in better ground to see where it has an effect. So
Eric, talk a little bit about, you wrote a blog last year, and while we're on the topic of, data and field trials, talk about how you go about setting one up. Do you remember that blog that you wrote? It's been a while.
Yeah.
You walked step by step to really show a grower how to set something up in the field so that they can test it. And I see it over and over again. They'll try something, but there's not a check. So what can you compare it to? So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, some of the kind of very first basics is, whatever we're testing, make sure we have a representative area, portion of the field that's going to perform similarly to, the area that we're applying, that we're testing a product or theory on. Avoiding field edges, field boundaries, all those type of things, because I see too many times when growers want to do something or try something, it's easy that, oh, well, I'm going to pull into the field, I'm going to spray off, and then I'm just going to, whatever the remainder of the field, I'm going to spray and dump off because I know I've got this many gallons in the field, and so this equals this many acres. But a lot of times what happens is a lot of times I see when that methodology is used, say we border the field so the end rows only get applied, or maybe the end rows don't get applied, so one or the other. And so we're trying to use end rows or field edges as a comparison method. And that just simply doesn't work because there's too many variables going on there. But from my experience, to really make good field trials is we've got to have, replication across the field. Now, whether that's strip trials going across the field from end to end and replicated throughout the field, Or the other thing is that we actually need to set up like replicated blocks in the field, but it's not blocks going with the rows. Actually, you need to set up blocks that are perpendicular to the row, because too many times I see, especially when it maybe application or even harvest, that unfortunately anytime that there's human interaction with, say, doing any type of trialing, there's the chance of error.
Mm-hmm.
And so as good as intentions are, there's always error. And so if we can do these blocks where they're basically applied perpendicular to the normal traffic patterns, whatever errors or mistakes that happen, maybe say with application or combining, you'll go in and out of those replicated treated areas and minimize your risk of error. And so think about, if you can utilize, application, variable rate technology, or just rate controllers. And so you can set up predefined areas in the field to where only those areas of the field get applied. So if you're doing something with a post application pass, any timing, pick it, whatever your poison is, but then set up those blocks to where they're perpendicular, and then replicate those and stack those on top of each other. And so then you create a lot of untreated check areas and you create a lot of treated areas, and you can very easily, avoid some of those application or harvest yields, whether, it's you're forgetting to calibrate the monitor or you for whatever reason, but you just minimize some of those errors. And if I remember right, I think those are some of the things that I referenced. And then always, as technology advances and everything, use rate controllers. Rate controllers make a predefined prescription, makes doing field trials really easy. And then, good combine calibrations in the fall. And I see too many growers that get hung up on, they don't want to take the time to do combine calibrations. Well, combine calibrations aren't the same thing as they were 10, 15 years ago, where it was a half-day process and you were ready to pull your hair out at the end of it because it was so frustrating. But literally now you harvest a known area, you weigh it, and you plug that information into the combine yield monitor, and it does all the work for you. Now there may be a few more steps in that, depending on which color equipment you're running, but it's literally that simple. You can either take a load into town. I know my team, we're always happy to bring out a weigh wagon to help a grower out if they don't have the means to do it on the field, or you can haul just a load into town. And so there's a lot of different ways, combine yield monitors, and it's just so important to have good calibrated equipment.
It definitely sounds like a lot of work, that's for sure, to do these kind of field trials. But, going back to getting the information, agronomists can help you, but it sounds like until you try it yourself, that's how you're going to learn, is by doing things such as these trials.
Have to verify that you got this result on your own field.
Yeah.
Okay. Karen, going back to, the independent crop consultant side, how have you seen biases on your own side? I mean, there's going to be some. So how do you combat that, or how do you navigate that? And how can a farmer tell if he's working with an independent that maybe they don't have my best interest in mind?
Well, I think that growers have to form an entire advisory team and gather their own information and then decide for themselves what they want to do. Because at the end of the day, it's still their money. So I don't take offense if they don't take my advice and take someone else's. They have to be comfortable with the decision that they're making and go from there. That
you like that?
Answer your question, but
yeah. Eric, what
it doesn't really matter, the product, if it does what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so I understand that certain retailers go with certain brands because they can buy in volume. And if that product works for what we need it to do, I don't have an issue with that. And so a lot of times I will give more than one recommendation, or they'll come back and say, well, this is, if I do this program, then these are some options that I have, and we'll go through those and pick out the options.
Mm-hmm. Eric, going back to the panel, were there other things that stuck out to you that you're like, I want to debunk that stereotype of ag retail, or didn't agree with?
Yeah, so some things that I routinely see when I get recommendations, or I know that a grower is working with an independent consultant. Sometimes things I see is that, and I think sometimes some of these maybe misconceptions, or maybe just the differences between the consultant and the retailer is that it's just there's a breakdown in communication between the two parties. A lot of times I see that, a consultant, say for dry fertilizer, well, all their dry fertilizer recs, P recs, for phosphorus are all going to be for DAP. Well, for instance, we're a company that utilizes MAP because one, we think that, there's a little bit better use efficiency of the phosphorus, and that we see, there we can get more pounds of the desired product phosphorus than DAP. Just looking at the analysis. So just some difference between DAP and MAP. I think we're all aware of that. But just some things like that, that the grower, they see those discrepancies, and so then it puts doubt in the grower's mind. I think we're all trying to achieve that we're still going to get the same, say, pounds of acre or pounds of active ingredient, whatever, on the ground to what's desired. But because the grower sees those discrepancies, they don't always recognize that. And if it was just something as simple as a case that if the consultant knows that this grower is working with retailer A, just pick up the phone call and be like, hey, what are some of the typical products you service? And I think it'd be a win for both parties. The same thing for for crop protection with pesticides is that a lot of times I'll see, just as you mentioned, Kelsey, that sometimes crop consultants maybe have one preference of, say, of brand X or brand B. And a lot of times those same active ingredients are sold in multiple jugs across the line, but because just there again, whatever brand we may be using, it's the same active ingredient, but there again, it puts doubt sometimes it puts doubt in the grower's mind. Because
do you think it's just confusion?
It's not what the consultant recommended.
Yeah, it's just more confusion.
Yeah.
I will say with our soil test, the grower has to tell us the product that they're using. And if it's not correct in the data that they send out, when they ask for a VRT file, it will be corrected. But that's on the grower when they put in the order, whether they're going to use MAP, DAP, MES, whatever it is, that's on them. So, and we do switch it out. I mean, easily. It doesn't take very much to change it, but
no, it doesn't.
So I've learned throughout my, some would say, young professional career, even though I am 30, that a lot of times it comes down to communication. And a problem, it's either miscommunication, no communication, or over communication. Very rarely do I see over communication. It's either mis or non-communication. And what I'm hearing here is that these parties, ag retailers, independent consultants, you have agronomists at seed companies, can work together if there's that communication from the grower. Do you think the grower doesn't want people to know that they're using multiple agronomists, or is that to their benefit and they should take advantage of that? Like you said, Karen, kind of an advisory team.
Well, I can't talk to Eric unless the specific farmer asks me to talk to Eric about his field. So that's kind of how we've always done it. If a farmer wants me to send someone like Eric a VRT file, they have to put that in writing that that's who it goes to. Or if they're out in the field, they can call, but I will send the VRT file to both the retailer and the farmer so that they have a copy of the email per our conversation. I think part of it too is, when we listen, we don't always hear everything. And sometimes we start focusing on one thing that was said and don't hear the rest of it. And I think that can also feed into some of the conflict between the different advisors that the farmer has, if that makes sense.
Eric, what about you? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that the communication is key, and that it's just like I mentioned before. It's usually a breakdown in communication, and Karen, I wish there was more cases of maybe consultants that maybe had maybe your approach that I came across, because I feel like too many times that, like, say you mentioned VRT files, like we just get generic VRT files, and there again, like if it was picked up, and I'm sure that, like, say when you export VRT files, you have the capability of what equipment they're going to, and you can format them to that. And so a lot of times, even like at ag retail, when we get VRT files, we have to then upload it and then manipulate it, not manipulate, not change the recs that have been done, but make it so that it'll work with our equipment that we're utilizing for application.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's extra steps in there, and it usually turns into a process that if we just created the recs ourselves, they'd be the exact same as Karen created, but we can, and so it's some extra steps then that ag retail has to do that the grower doesn't always recognize.
Going into
and so it creates some friction there.
Yeah. Well, friction, and then goes back to the miscommunication and efficiency and doing what's best for the grower, because all that time spent, redoing things, if you would have just done it the first time, they always say, then that's wasted time you'll never get back. But at the same time,
I'm guessing we all waste way more time.
Yeah, I know I
probably. Honestly, and that's how you learn. Make a mistake.
BRT file literally takes 2 minutes.
Yeah, there's nothing to it.
Okay. So what I'm hearing from you guys is this relationship between ag retail, agronomists, and then independent can work together more effectively if there's just more communication between the two. And that would cause less problems and maybe gain the perspective of the others as well. Go ahead, Karen.
The communication needs to be driven by the farmer, not either of us.
Okay. Eric, anything else that I'm thinking? I have a few more questions not related to this topic, but wrapping it up, I don't want to drag this out. It's just, it came up as, ag retail felt like the panel was being too critical, but it sounds like, we all need to work together towards the interests of the farmer. If that's what the heart of it is, it sounds like it'll work out.
Yeah. Another thing that, I think that some things I heard too, or things that I've heard that, you look at soil testing, a lot of soil tests, when I see soil tests come back from independent consultants, a lot of times it's in parts per million. Can we just agree on a single unit of measure? Pounds per acre. Growers know pounds per acre. The pounds per. I mean, I understand.
World outside of Illinois uses pounds per acre. So Dr. John Jones, I think, is going to try to switch everybody over to pounds per million.
So I mean, I understand some of the micros, on foliars, or even some of the pounds per ppm. That makes more sense for some of the things, but for macros, growers don't understand that. So this is probably just preaching to the crowd. Choir. I think you understand this, Karen, but just use pounds per acre, and we all get along.
Per product instead of P2O5 or K2O, because I feel like that confuses farmers too.
Yes. Yep. Exactly. And then some things that maybe this is just some education on the grower's time frame or product, but I think. There again, the communication, say with herbicide applications and adjuvants and everything like that, I realize that, per the chemical label, they're going to talk, the basic NIS, crop oil, whatever. But I will say that some of the, advantages of, if nothing else, like the adjuvants that I recommend and that we use, there are some utility agents that are built into it. And there is good evidence to suggest that these utility agents do provide, qualities to that spray mixture that if you were to just use traditional sources alone, we've got documented, evidence suggests that these enhanced products, say, some of the water conditioners where there's, say a hermectant, or even some of the, some of the adjuvants we use with fungicide applications. I know he likes to say the foo-foo juice with the fungicide applications, but I would really beg to differ that hasn't seen the entire picture of some, say the deposition aids that we use with our fungicides, but we also know that, certain compounds in certain adjuvants that can cause arrested ear syndrome, say with fungicide applications, and the products we're using do not have those compounds. Now, while we realize we don't exactly know what causes, but we do know that those two compounds, say APE and MPE, are responsible for arrested ear. And so we make sure that those products are not in some of those tank mixtures.
But I've seen arrested ear with no adjuvants and no extra fertilizers or anything in it. So I think it's a little bit more complex than just that. But I will take ownership. I was the one talking about adjuvants on the panel. When growers come to me and they have to try and save money, saving money, are some of these will use a regular adjuvant instead of using a proprietary one. And look how much you can save here. If you can't prove to yourself that it works better, then you shouldn't be using it. But yeah, the adjuvant one, that was totally me. I take ownership of that. But I still believe that, if you need to look at every penny, that might not be where I would put my pennies.
I guess my rebuttal is: do you want a dead weed or not? And I've seen the difference between some of these, say, generics or standalone. Maybe say the tried and true or whatever's on the label that is truly just a crop oil versus some of the proprietary stuff. That there is quite a bit of a difference.
Well, and then we have to both go from our experiences. So, I've been doing this for 25 years and I've seen a lot of good work with just what you need, as far as the adjuvant. So, I give my advice, you give yours. It's the grower's money. They need to do what they need to do.
That's what I was about to say. It's good to disagree. And Karen, if you talk about an advisory panel, you don't want an advisory panel that always agrees with each other. Right. You both come from different backgrounds. You have seen different things. And like you said, you come from your experience. Like Eric, you come from an ag retail, Karen from an independent, and it's okay to disagree. I think in today's landscape, if you disagree with something, it's automatically bad. No, it's just you're getting input from all sides, and then you can make the most informed decision, I guess is what we're getting at. But Eric, I do agree with you. It's important to get the bigger picture. I feel like so many times we see a sliver of something and then we don't look at it from maybe the 30,000 feet high view.
Yeah.
So I think it is important to gather all the information to make that informed decision and not just parts of it, because I do see that as well when that affects the outcome. And most of the time, if you don't have that information, then you're not going to like the outcome that comes along with it. At least that's what I've experienced. And going into my third growing season here, that's what I've seen. That's what I've observed. So that's why I want to take the opportunity to hopefully present it from all sides like we're doing today. So anything else on our pet peeve list? We might as well just air them out there, honestly. Eric's like, let me get my list.
I guess just really want communicate to growers that when growers win, we win too. And I mean, it's, I think there probably was once upon a time that it was about how many pounds can you get on the ground and how many gallons can you sell. But that's simply not the case as we move forward. I mean, ag retail, there's so many watchdog organizations that, if nothing else, they're looking over our shoulder beyond whatever the grower, might be looking over our shoulder. So we've got to comply. And I guess I would say that when we're not in a growing season, we're trying to do everything so we can keep up to speed and be knowledgeable of everything, all the products and services that we're recommending to our grower customers at the end of the day, and making sure we're doing it right. Because if nothing else, when the litigation and fines do come down, who's got the deeper pockets? Let's face it, it's ag retail. We're going to get fingers pointed at us. So we've got to do it right. And so I think that, like I said before, I think there's bad eggs on both sides of the fence, but I would like to, just shine that not all ag retail is similar. And if growers do have questions about it, well, then maybe it's time that you need to look for a new retailer. That if you don't think your retailer has your best interest at heart, it's probably time for you to look for a new retailer. I hate to say it, but it's the truth.
That's when you do have the farmer's interest in mind. When you say that, and I think some farmers, well, I've been with so and so for 40 years or 50 years. You have to look and see who can help me grow and what my goals are and who can help me accomplish that. So
it's a relationship business.
Yeah. Well, it has to be, Because if you're not being trusted, when I talked to Brandon Hall about this, he was like, you got to find your trusted advisor, whoever that may be. Could be on the retail side, could be on the independent side, could be the seed person you work with. It has to be someone that you can trust at the end of the day. So,
and that will be different for every farmer.
Yeah. Before I let you go, I have to ask, I got you here looking ahead to spring planting season. What's on your radar? Eric, I'll start with you.
At least in the part of the world that I work in, last fall was not a good fall for us. So, and even for our growers and everything. So there's a lot of field work still yet to be done this spring. And so right now the rain hasn't really necessarily moved in completely our area. So we're still, under the gun we're busy trying to do making anhydrous applications as we speak here today. So, I would encourage growers that if you are in that boat, that you remember keep good agronomy in the background, because I've seen some cases where growers are trying to push it and we're making ruts out there with anhydrous applicators, or even we're doing deep tillage right now, which that really scares me right now this time of year, and there's still being frost in the ground. So just remember, keep good agronomy practices in mind. I mean, we always get the work done. We always get a crop in, but just take it one day at a time and fight to survive another day.
I did see dry fertilizer going on at the end of January, and that kind of like what time of year is it? It kind of surprised me, to be honest. But I mean, if the ground was fit for it, make the most of that time, I guess. But it just kind of startled me. I'm like, what time of year is it? Am I like in a different zone right now? But no, it was end of January, which I thought was interesting. So some good advice there.
Yeah. So just remember good agronomy practices. I mean, the weather's going to turn around. We're going to, spring will be here soon enough. Let's not push it and make some bad mistakes that we're going to regret for the rest of the year.
Yeah. Karen, what about you?
I've had 1.65 inches so far today.
Ooh.
So my thoughts are hoping my sump pump is still working. But hoping too that, with the frozen ground, that we don't cause a lot of runoff and, cause environmental issues that we are going to be blamed for later. But, there's some things we can control and some things we can't.
I was just about to say that's one thing you just can't control is definitely the weather. That's for sure. But just to keep an eye on it. I know we had our first thunderstorm overnight where I'm at in northern Knox County, which, again, I was like, whoop, spring is just around the corner. And I did see somewhere today that there's one model that's forecasting a wet spring. And I'm going to have Matt Reardon with Conduit Ag talk to him. He's a meteorologist. I'm going to talk to him about it because I said, how can you know? Which most of the time they don't. It's just a prediction. But then at the same time, I'm like, what do we know that we can go off of? Because I know farmers are just itching to know what that spring forecast looks like. And like you said, you can't control it.
Deception right now. We have to wait for another winter before we get to real spring.
Yeah, for sure. Anything else I didn't mention today that you'd like to talk about? Floor is open.
I would say just for everyone in ag, take it easy, take it slow, keep safety at your forefront.
Yes.
And make sure we're all here to harvest it in the fall.
It's going to be an interesting year. It always is, right? No one year is the same.
Interesting week.
Yeah. We were just talking about tariffs before we started recording. I thought to myself, thank goodness this is an agronomy podcast because I don't think I could get on that topic right now. Well, we could, but I'm going to choose not to because there's plenty of others doing that for us. So
let's just pretend it's not happening.
Yeah. Well, thanks again to Eric and Karen for coming on today. I know it wasn't the best topic to talk about, but I felt after that panel we need to have some kind of conversation to let farmers know of what to be aware of. And I like some of where the advice came from and gave some perspective on that issue. So thank you both very much. Thanks for listening to the Field Advisor Podcast, unbiased, independent agronomy information to keep your farm moving forward. I'm Kelsey Litchfield, your voice from the field. This podcast is funded by the Illinois Soybean Association Checkoff Program. Stay connected with Field Advisor on social media. Follow, like, and share to keep the conversation going. And don't forget to subscribe to the Field Advisor podcast on your favorite podcast platform.